I am currently riding Honda's 1975 CB550. This is the F model. It's a Super Sport. I'm riding this bike back to back with Suzuki's 1981 GS550T.
Hi, and welcome to this episode of John's Motorcycle Rescue and Review. Man, today I'm super excited to be with two beautiful mid-range, mid-70s to early 80s motorcycles. And the first one up here is Honda's 1975 CB550 Super Sport. And this motorcycle had a single overhead cam, 4-cylinder motor. It had a large disc brake in the front, and it had a drum brake in the rear. And in its day, it was the most refined, the best performing mid-range motorcycle, and there really wasn't anything to compete with it. The refinement of that 550cc 4-cylinder was just amazing, and it was really trend-setting. Honda also introduced the Super Sport line of their motorcycles, and the Super Sports are supposed to be a little bit sportier. And really I don't know that they did a whole lot to the engine or the brakes or anything else on the bikes, but they did upgrade the exhaust. They put a 4-in-1 exhaust collector on there, and you can see it on that bike. And so they sound neat, and I love the clean style of the CB550. I think it's just a beautiful bike. I love that color, that electric blue. My friend Bill was kind enough to let me use this bike for this review and this back-to-back comparison here. And so what a treat, what a privilege to get to ride these two machines back-to-back. Just see the differences between them, the differences in personality, what they're like to ride. The next bike up here is Suzuki's 1981 GS550T. So this bike is quite a few years later than the Honda. And so in that time period, some of the differences you're going to notice are this bike has a dual overhead cam motor. It also has the large disc brake in the front. It's got a large disc brake in the rear, and that's an upgrade. That's an improvement over the Honda. It also has constant velocity carb, and the constant velocity carbs were supposedly more efficient, and especially with the EPA jetting and everything, they gave a little bit better, more linear throttle response. There's definitely two camps of thinking as far as which ones are better, the constant velocity carbs that are on here or the older style carbs that are on the Honda. But as far as efficiency goes, as far as emissions go, the constant velocity ones were certainly the way to go. This bike has dual exhausts on it as opposed to the Honda's 4-in-1. They're both neat machines. This bike also has a 6-speed transmission versus the Honda's 5-speed transmission. And again, that's just, they were on the smaller bikes, they were going to the 6 speeds, and now most bikes have 6-speed transmission. Both of these bikes were designed to be everyday transportation. By the time the Suzuki debuted, it was almost to the smaller end of the mid-range in manufacturer's lineup. So, Suzuki had a 750, they had a 1000. By 81, they'd gone to the 1100cc bikes as far as their big bikes. Even in 75, Honda had just introduced their Goldwing, and they had their 750 and the 550. It was kind of transitioning. It's like it got lower and lower on the totem pole. But really, these are good mid-range bikes. If you're a little bit smaller rider, they definitely will fit you better than the bigger bikes. Depending on the riding you're doing, a lot of times these small and mid-range bikes are really better suited for the riding that most people do. The real question is, what are these bikes like to ride out on the road? What are they like back to back? How do their personalities translate, when you're actually riding them, and what do they feel like? Well, I'm going to grab my gear. I'll bring the camera along. Let's find out together. Let's ride.
I am currently riding Honda's 1975 CB550. This is the F model. It's a Super Sport. I'm riding this bike back to back with Suzuki's 1981 GS550T. And it's really cool to ride these bikes back to back and just kind of feel some of the differences. This CB550 has a 5-speed transmission. The Suzuki has a 6-speed. Both of these bikes shift nicely. They both have 550cc 4-cylinder motors. I kind of like the sound of this, the exhaust that's mounted on this CB550. I like the sound of a 4-1 pipe on a 4-cylinder motor. But these bikes are just both super cool. They're kind of designed, the design parameters were a little bit different. By the time the 1981 Suzuki came out, it was kind of seen as a smaller bike. And you know, when this bike debuted, it was more of a mid-range machine, and that's just kind of the progression of time. But as such, this 550, I don't know if it's exactly like the wheel sizes and everything, if it's a little bit different between the bikes, but this feels a little bit maybe more stable at speed, and a little bit maybe like it was designed with a little bit more sporting intent. And so whereas the Suzuki, you just hop on it and instantly it's very flickable and very light and very easy. This is a little bit more stable. The Suzuki definitely has a nod in the braking department. It's got the dual discs, and this has a single disc in the front, and it's got the drum brake in the rear. And you can hear the little bit of squeal in the front brake, and that was just, it wasn't uncommon on bikes with disc brakes from this time period. Nothing wrong with the brakes, it's just they're noisy. It's surprising to me how nice these CB550s are. I had one back in the day, back when I was in college, and it was pretty ratted out. It wasn't as nice as this one, but I really, really enjoyed it. I just thought it was so super smooth, and it handled very well. It was very stable. And the ride on it is surprisingly compliant as well. And it's interesting, but as far as bikes from the mid-70s that I've ridden, in this size range, this is my favorite one I've ridden to date. And even though it's only a 550, the motor has decent pull from low RPM. And there's that lovely sound. Oh yeah. Now this isn't my bike, so I'm not, you know, revving it to the moon. But just even at that pace, it's so enjoyable. Very smooth, very, very refined. I love it. Instrumentation on this CB550 is typical of the era. It's got a big speedometer and a big tach. And then you've got a low oil pressure light and a couple of other indicator lights. I'm riding this bike first between this one and the Suzuki. And it's going to be really interesting to see kind of how the Suzuki compares. But I'm just so impressed with this Honda. And I certainly wouldn't mind having one in my garage. I think they're just really neat machines. And I personally, I like the 4x4 exhausts that are on some of the models, but to me, I actually prefer the Super Sport model of the 550. I think it's just a cool bike. I am currently riding Suzuki's 1981 GS550T, and I'm riding it back to back with Honda's 1975 CB550 Four. And then on paper, these bikes are very similar. They both have the 8-valve motors. They're both 550cc bikes, chain drive. You know, there are a couple of differences on paper. The 550T has a 6-speed. It also has dual disc brakes. It's got a big disc brake up front, and it also has a big disc brake out back. So it definitely has an advantage. And even though it has a 6-speed, it actually feels like it's geared a little bit lower than the Honda. The Honda feels like the gear spacing is a little bit wider, and then ultimately in top gear it feels like it's revving a little bit lower. But the power plant in each one of these bikes is really very entertaining, and this Suzuki, it's peppy. I would say the Honda's just a hair smoother than this Suzuki is, but the Suzuki probably has a little bit of an edge in power. And the shorter gearing on the Suzuki, if that is the case, the shorter gearing actually contributes to it feeling a little bit peppier. But even a 6th gear on back roads, you know, both of these bikes make decent mid-range power and low-end power. Oh yeah, very nice. Yeah, back to back, this Suzuki, surprisingly, it's got a very sporty feel to it. The brakes are significantly, they take less effort and they're more aggressive, so it really does stop quickly. The handling on it's very easy, as it is on both bikes, but I think for a beginner rider, the Suzuki is probably just a little bit more nimble. And a lot of that, I think, has to do with the chassis geometry and the wheel sizes that are a little bit different here. And even though I like the sound of a 4-into-1 exhaust on a bike, this Suzuki, the dual exhaust actually sounds pretty good out on the road. Instrumentation wise, the Suzuki has a little bit of an advantage. It's got the gear indicator, which I really like. But otherwise, it's almost identical to the Honda. Yeah, this is a little bit of a little hot rod. I definitely like the feel of the Suzuki. Seating position wise, I think I would give the nod as far as what fits my tall frame better. I like the way the Honda feels. It actually feels more like a mid-range bike, and this to me feels a little bit like it's set up like a smaller bike. Ride compliance on both of these bikes is really nice. I would say carburation wise, the Suzuki is of a time period when they were going to more lean EPA jetting, and so I can tell it'll probably be more fuel efficient as it goes through a tank of gas, but it also means it's a little bit more cold-blooded than the Honda is. Now, I don't know, this Suzuki I know has stock jetting in it. I don't know if the Honda has been messed with, but it does seem like it's tuned a little bit richer than this. Control input on this Suzuki is lighter. It's got a very light clutch. As I said, the brakes are excellent. Steering input is light. Go through a set of corners here. Very nice. Yeah, very nice pickup, very nice control in the handling department, awesome brakes. I'm really surprised at the modern feel on the Suzuki. I think it would compare quite favorably with much more modern bikes. And if you got on it, it just doesn't have really much of a vintage feel to it. It feels just surprisingly modern. Very safe with the brakes, very safe with the intuitive handling on it. Got that nice smooth power plant. Yeah, what a treat to ride both of these bikes back to back. They both are just super neat machines, and they provide really a contrast. They're not the same. They have definitely their own personalities, they have their own feel to them, and they're each really enjoyable and rewarding to drive. If you're looking for something that has more of the vintage feel, more of that flavor of the 70s, you know, that Honda is just hard to beat. I love the look of the Honda. I love the sound with that 4-into-1 exhaust. And to me, the seating position is really, really nice. It feels like it's a little bit roomier, and I'm 6'4", so that's a benefit. You know, on the other hand, this Suzuki is much more modern feeling, more modern brakes. The engine tuning on it feels a little bit revier, a little bit racier. I would say the Honda has the smoother power plant of the two and kind of pulls the most smoothly from low RPM, you know, up to through high RPM. But this Suzuki definitely feels a little bit edgier in the power plant, so it probably makes a little bit more horsepower. But I wouldn't say that either one of them necessarily has an edge. It's just the kind of, you know, what feel do you prefer? Styling-wise as well, these bikes are different. There's not really a right or wrong answer as far as like which one you like better. If you like kind of the more modern style of the Suzuki, it is very cleanly styled. Probably for me, I really do like the styling on the Honda, and then I also, that electric blue color is just really, really pretty. So I think that's a neat bike. But I also love black and gold with the you know, gold accents on it of the Suzuki. Both neat machines.
All right, what a fun treat. That was really cool. What a pleasure. I had previously reviewed this Suzuki and Honda's CB550, their 1979, kind of the second gen CB550. And, you know, came away, it was just really revealing in just a few short years, the amount of progress that had been made on the bike really transformed the feel of bikes that are in a similar class category. So it really is kind of surprising to ride these two back to back. Does that mean in every way the Suzuki's a better machine? No, it actually doesn't. I think the way that it's set up, I like the fueling and the way that the jetting on the Honda actually seems to provide a little bit better fueling, a little bit just more linear. The Suzuki is a little bit edgier maybe on the fueling, and a lot of that has to do with when they went to the jetting on these CV carbs, they're more lean, so they're not getting it quite as much fuel. And I think with a little bit of playing around, you could probably get this Suzuki so where it was just a little bit, you know, riching up the pilot jets, and it would probably be very close between these two. As far as brakes go, hands down, man, the Suzuki just has far superior brakes. Transmissions, they both shift very nicely. Even though this is a 6-speed, it actually feels like in top gear, it might even be a little bit geared lower than the Honda, which was a surprise. The Honda definitely, because of the gearing, because it's a 5-speed and there's more space between the gears and the fueling, it actually feels a little bit more relaxed to ride. Very nice. Handling wise, I really like the way both of these bikes handle. They handle differently. The Suzuki, I would say, has the edge in just flickability and instantly confidence inspiring, but I would say that the Honda has the edge in stability, and you know, if you're doing higher speed riding or a longer ride, it definitely has some advantages there. But I'd love to know what you guys think. I'd love to know, you know, if we've got some Honda CB550 fans out there and you want to make a case for why the CB550 is a great bike. It really is. Fantastic bike. I love the styling on it. Honestly, I would love to have one of these in the garage. I just think it's a beautiful machine. Really, really nice. Likewise, if you're a Suzuki fan and a GS fan, and you've watched this channel at all, you know I'm a Suzuki GS fan. I love a lot of bikes in that lineup. I get it. These things are fantastic. Great machines. Both of these bikes, really. There's not a winner here. It's a comparison. It's kind of just telling you what they're like and what the differences are. And they each have their own personalities, and I really, really like both of these bikes. They're both super fun. I hope you found this video entertaining and informative. And until next time, enjoy the ride.